Good morning, everyone. My name is Nick Hanna. I'm the United States Attorney here in Los Angeles. I'm joined here by Acting Special Agent in charge of the Internal Revenue Service's Criminal Investigative Division, Ryan Corner, in Los Angeles. We are announcing today that a federal grand jury in Santa Ana, California, has returned a 36-count indictment against attorney Michael Avenatti. This indictment is now the operative charging document in the case. The indictment substantially broadens the criminal conduct that was charged in the criminal complaint that was unsealed on March 25th. The charges now being alleged against Mr. Avenatti can be broken down into four general categories. First, wire fraud, related to the theft of millions of dollars from 5 clients, including a paraplegic man who agreed to a multi-million-dollar settlement, but has received only a fraction of the money despite the fact that Mr. Avenatti received the full settlement amount over 4 years ago. Second, tax fraud, including failing to file income tax returns for himself and his law firm. As you will hear in a few minutes from Special Agent in Charge Corner, Mr. Avenatti also allegedly took steps designed to obstruct an IRS collection, hide his coffee company's income, and prevent the IRS from collecting on a series of tax liens and levies filed since 2017. Third, bank fraud, including the allegations in the original complaint that Mr. Avenatti received 3 loans from a Mississippi bank based on applications supported by phony tax returns. And fourth, bankruptcy fraud. The indictment alleges that after his law firm was forced into bankruptcy over 2 years ago, Mr. Avenatti has repeatedly lied to the bankruptcy court, to the bankruptcy trustee, and to his creditors by failing to report income his bankrupt firm was receiving. These 4 areas of criminal conduct alleged in the indictment are all linked to one another because money generated from one set of crimes was used to further other crimes, typically in the form of payments designed to string along victims so as to prevent Mr. Avenatti's financial house of cards from collapsing. I will now discuss the various areas of criminal conduct in a bit more detail. The first area of criminal conduct discussed in the indictment alleges that Mr. Avenatti committed wire fraud in relation to funds, more than $12 million in total, that he received and held in trust on behalf of his clients. While Mr. Avenatti was entitled to attorney's fees for the settlements he negotiated, the indictment alleges that he nevertheless stole millions of dollars that rightfully belonged to his clients. There are 5 separate client victims in 4 cases in which money was stolen. The indictment outlines how Mr. Avenatti's embezzlement scheme typically operated. In each of the 4 cases of embezzlement alleged in the indictment, Mr. Avenatti received money on behalf of clients into client trust accounts, misappropriated the money, and lied to the clients about receiving the money, or in one case, claimed that the money had already been sent to the client. The first client victim detailed in the indictment filed a lawsuit alleging that the County of Los Angeles violated his constitutional rights and that he suffered severe emotional distress and severe physical injuries, including becoming a paraplegic. The victim, who is identified as Client 1 in the indictment, obtained a $4 million settlement, which the County of Los Angeles paid in January 2015 to a trust account controlled by Mr. Avenatti. But more than 4 years later, Client 1 is still waiting to receive his portion of the settlement. As it turns out, within months after receiving the settlement proceeds in early 2015, Mr. Avenatti had drained the entire $4 million payment from his trust account, using significant portions of these funds to finance his coffee business, his auto racing enterprise, and his own personal lifestyle. From July 2015 through last month, Mr. Avenatti made periodic payments of no more than $1,900 to Client 1, and paid his rent at various assisted living facilities, calling these expenditures, quote unquote, advances on the settlement. According to the indictment, Mr. Avenatti also undermined Client 1's efforts to buy a house for himself. Mr. Avenatti had assured Client 1 that he could use the money from the settlement to buy the property. But Mr. Avenatti later falsely told Client 1 that the settlement was not available because the county had not yet approved a trust for the disabled client. The house Client 1 wanted to buy fell out of escrow because the money already paid by the county had been pilfered by Mr. Avenatti. And to further complicate matters for Client 1, Mr. Avenatti, who promised to respond to a Social Security Administration inquiry related to Client 1's disability, failed to do so. And 2 months ago, Client 1 lost his Social Security benefits. The other three client matters outlined in the indictment regarding Mr. Avenatti's alleged theft of millions of dollars are similar. Mr. Avenatti received money on behalf of clients and simply took the money to finance his businesses and his personal expenses. In one case, after receiving $2.75 million for a client, Mr. Avenatti allegedly took nearly all that money and used it to pay for his portion of a private jet, a jet, incidentally, that we seized yesterday. With respect to the tax matters, Special Agent Corner will provide you with the details of the numerous tax offenses alleged in the indictment. But I want to note that some of the money withheld from the paychecks of employees of his coffee company, money that was being held in trust and was supposed to be used to pay payroll taxes, was instead used by Mr. Avenatti in relation to other crimes alleged in the indictment, including making lulling payments to clients from whom he had stolen settlement money. Following Mr. Avenatti's arrest on March 25th, I discussed the facts related to an alleged bank fraud set forth in the criminal complaint. The indictment restates these offenses, which began in 2014, when Mr. Avenatti allegedly defrauded the People's Bank, a federally insured financial institution in Mississippi, by making false representations about his income. Very simply, these false claims about his income were made by submitting fictitious income tax returns for both himself and his law firm. These personal tax returns submitted to the bank were clearly fake because, as reflected in the indictment, Mr. Avenatti failed to file any personal income tax returns since 2010. Moreover, the law firm tax return was fraudulent because it claimed millions of dollars in gross income, more than what was actually reported to the IRS. In the fourth area of criminal conduct alleged in the indictment, Mr. Avenatti allegedly filed, under penalty of perjury, a series of documents in United States bankruptcy court that fraudulently understated the amount of money that was coming into his bankrupt law firm. The indictment also alleges that Mr. Avenatti lied during under oath testimony that he had not received any fees in relation to a particular case when he, in fact, had received those fees. The bankruptcy case is related to the theft of client funds because Mr. Avenatti allegedly used money stolen from one client to pay his creditors, including to pay off an IRS tax lien at issue in the bankruptcy. If convicted of the 36 crimes alleged in the indictment, Mr. Avenatti would face a statutory maximum sentence of 333 years in federal prison, plus a mandatory 2-year consecutive term for an identity theft count. Of course, the ultimate sentence would be up to a judge following a conviction. At this point, I want to stress that Mr. Avenatti is presumed innocent unless and until he is proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in court. The indictment also contains 2 forfeiture allegations. In the event of his conviction, seek to have proceeds of Mr. Avenatti's fraudulent conduct forfeited to the government. In relation to this, as I mentioned, authorities seized a $5 million jet that Mr. Avenatti co-owned, a purchase he made with money allegedly stolen from a client. I want to express my appreciation to the IRS criminal investigators who have done excellent work on this case. This matter is the result of over 2.5 years of tax collection efforts and investigation by the IRS. The investigation in this case is ongoing. I also want to acknowledge the prosecutors on this case, Assistant U.S. Attorneys Julian Andre and Brett Sagal, both of whom are up on stage with me today. Mr. Avenatti, who is free on bond in this case and in an unrelated federal case in New York, is scheduled to be arraigned on the indictment on April 29th. At that time, he'll be asked to enter a plea to the charges and a trial date will be scheduled. At this time, I'd now like to introduce Special Agent in Charge Ryan Corner, and following Agent Corner's remarks, we'll take a few questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hanna. Good morning. My name is Ryan Corner. I'm the Special Agent in Charge for IRS Criminal Investigation in Los Angeles. At the heart of the 36-count indictment announced today is a homegrown tax case, worked first by the IRS Civil Division and later referred to Criminal Investigation, where for the last year, our special agents used their unique talents to uncover a tangled financial web of lies. The indictment paints the picture of an individual who began to run afoul with the IRS nearly a decade ago. For 2009, Michael Avenatti filed an individual income tax return reporting income of $1.9 million, but failed to timely pay taxes due of $569,000. For 2010, Mr. Avenatti reported total income of $1.1 million, but again, failed to timely pay the taxes due of $281,000. Mr. Avenatti's outstanding tax debt was not fully paid until 2015, when Mr. Avenatti sold his Laguna Beach home, which it should be noted was encumbered by a tax lien, for over $12 million. That 2010 Form 1040 is the last U.S. individual income tax return Mr. Avenatti has filed with the IRS. Mr. Avenatti's disregard for the federal tax laws did not stop with his personal income taxes. Once he acquired Tolly's Coffee Stores out of bankruptcy, Mr. Avenatti withheld the employment taxes from the paychecks of his baristas, cashiers, and store managers as required by law. However, it is alleged that between 2015 and 2017, Tolly's parent company, Global Baristas, failed to file the required employment tax returns and pay approximately $3.2 million in federal payroll taxes. This includes at least $2.3 million in trust fund taxes that Global Baristas had withheld from its employees' paychecks. In late 2016, the IRS initiated a collection action relating to Global Baristas' failure to file its quarterly employment tax returns and pay over to the IRS payroll taxes that Global Baristas had withheld from employees' paychecks. By June of 2017, a federal tax lien was filed against Global Baristas, reflecting the amount owed to the IRS for unpaid federal payroll taxes had reached almost $5 million. Undeterred by the IRS's collection action and the subsequent filing of the federal tax lien, Mr. Avenatti allegedly took steps to obstruct and impede the IRS's efforts to collect the payroll taxes owed by Global Baristas. The steps Mr. Avenatti took to thwart the IRS included lying to an IRS revenue officer, opening a new bank account to receive the company's credit card transactions, and directing employees to deposit all cash receipts from Tolly's stores into a little-used account belonging to GB Autosports, the entity which managed Avenatti's car racing team. Today's indictment also includes 10 counts related to Mr. Avenatti's willful failure to file tax returns. In addition to his alleged failure to file individual tax returns for 2014, 15, 16, and 17, Mr. Avenatti allegedly failed to file tax returns for his two law practices, Avenatti and Associates and Egan Avenatti, for the 2015, 2016, and 2017 tax years. During this same period, Mr. Avenatti allegedly embezzled and misappropriated millions of dollars in client settlement proceeds to which he was not entitled. Michael Avenatti allegedly stole from his clients, and he stole from the IRS. The money was used to fuel a lavish lifestyle that had no limits, including making mortgage payments on a multi-million-dollar home in Laguna Beach and purchasing a private plane. The two forfeiture allegations in the indictment will allow the government to seek the forfeiture of any assets related to Mr. Avenatti's alleged criminal offenses. This includes the forfeiture of Mr. Avenatti's Honda Jet, which was seized by our agents yesterday. Mr. Avenatti failed to meet his obligations to the government and now faces severe consequences if convicted of the crimes in the indictment, including significant jail time, substantial fines, and the forfeiture of his assets. As the tax filing season comes to an end, the indictment announced today sends a clear message that no one is above the law. IRS criminal investigation, in partnership with the United States Attorney's Office, is committed to protecting the integrity of the nation's tax and financial systems. We will investigate all individuals, including high-profile attorneys who violate the tax laws. Thank you, and with that, I will turn it back over to Mr. Hanna for questions.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take a few questions.
Michael Avenatti has been tweeting some of his responses to this.
Mhm.
One of the things that he is alluding to is this is a conspiracy by big people because he's gone after petty hitters. And then secondly, he had denied giving any money or taking any monies from clients. Can you address first the idea that this is some kind of conspiracy theory to take him down after he's gone after the president?
Nothing could be further from the truth. This case is based on the facts and the documents as outlined in the indictment. I think when you look at the indictment and you see the facts that are pled, you'll see why the charges have been levied.
So was this a Ponzi scheme in the sense that he was using some, based on the affidavit, some money to pay off others, and then taking money from them to pay off others?
I don't want to characterize it in a particular way, but I think the concept is correct. That taking money in one scheme and using it to lull clients, to string them along, to prevent them from going to authorities, and taking money from different pots as he needed it.
And on the outside, you're perfect, but does client one have any recourse? I mean, the account was drained, you said, so they would have to go through civil litigation to try to get any kind of assets from the defendant?
That would be true. I will tell you that certainly in our case, in the criminal case, restitution is one of our highest priorities, and we will be looking to recover restitution for all of the victims that we can identify.
And back on the shell game idea of this, does it seem as though Mr. Avenatti was obtaining these companies for the purposes of hiding money or at least finding new revenue streams in order to cover other costs? Was that the explicit purpose, or does it seem like he was actually trying to make money?
I don't want to characterize it in any particular way. There were a number of companies, a fairly tangled web of companies, and money being moved around to various accounts. Other than that, I'm going to leave it at that.
This started with
All I can speak to is, as an attorney, holding your client's money in trust is one of your highest duties. It is Lawyer 101. You do not steal your client's money. And that is one of your highest duties, and every lawyer knows it.
This started with an IRS criminal referral, but along the way, his former partner, represented by somebody who actually used to work in your office, has been gleaning a lot of highly incriminating information through subpoenaed bank records over civil debts. How has that played into your investigation? Is it a reference point for you on evidence? Is it direct evidence?
We've gathered evidence on our own. We've interviewed many, many witnesses. We've subpoenaed bank records, and we're basing it on the evidence that we've collected.
And are you following the investigation? I did notice that one of the gentlemen on stage attended his dinner exam. Obviously, you're paying attention to that.
We are paying attention, yes.
Are you investigating any other lawyers payments real quick. Are you investigating other?
Well, I'm not at liberty to talk about any other pending investigations.
For clarity, can you give us the timeline? When did this investigation start?
The IRS collection investigation, I don't have the exact year that started. September 2016. It's laid out in the indictment. So starting back in September of 2016, the IRS was trying to collect debts in connection with the coffee business. And you can see how those, as alleged in the indictment, how Mr. Avenatti attempted to avoid paying those debts, lied to the revenue officer. Ultimately, it was made a criminal referral to the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, and that's how we got involved.
Did he string along the IRS the same way he allegedly strung along his clients?
I think a fair characterization.
And also with client one, you mentioned that he paid some small sums. I think there are 69 payments for $120,000. Does that include the money he paid for rent for that client as well?
I don't have the answer to that, but we'll get that to you. Tom will get that to you.
Who is going to be able to get potentially some of their money back? How do you determine he's got a former partner that's owed $10 million, and then you have all of these clients that you just mentioned here? How do you determine if there are funds left to be given?
I can't say at this point in time. We're going to try to recover as much money as we can. My understanding is that from our perspective, the IRS matter started first.
This seems maybe a little bit pathological in terms of the number of clients that you've already outlined here. We expect perhaps more indictments, more cases to come up with clients that were settled.
I can't speak to that. All I can say is that this is what we've alleged in this particular indictment.
To what degree did his celebrity help this case kind of unravel? Were clients coming forward after they had seen him in the spotlight?
I really can't speak to the effect of his celebrity on it. Sorry.
Right, but the IRS probe began prior to his ascension to national claim.
Correct. Correct.
Let's take one more and we'll wrap it up. Who wants it?
Two more. Anyway,
Pardon me?
other lawyer that was trying to illegal, I think it's illegal.
That's not involved in this case.
Megan, last one.
The indictment indicates that the grand jury was seated back in September 2018. How did the complaint in New York affect the grand jury proceedings? Were you surprised by that? Did you guys rush out the complaint and roll this grand jury?
They're two separate investigations. So theirs was on a separate track from ours.
And finally, do you submit this to the California Bar?
I'm sure the California Bar, this is a public indictment. I'm sure the California Bar will see it and act accordingly.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone, for coming. I'm here available for follow-ups. If you have any questions, it's a complicated and detailed thing. So myself and Karen